Hey everybody, Z Garcia here, and today we're taking a look at an expansion to Ankh, Gods of Egypt. This is Pharaoh. In Pharaoh, you are bringing politics into the world of Ankh, Gods of Egypt by having a secondary board where you are going to send some new figures you have, and you are going to have the Pharaoh themselves show up on the board and influence specific areas of the board in various ways, depending on which Pharaoh that figure represents, which Pharaoh you are playing with. You also have a whole new deck of cards, a political deck of cards that is going to let you influence your turns in the game by doing interesting and wild new abilities. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this works. We'll come on back. I'll tell you what I think of it. To play with this expansion, each player is going to get the 3 priests in their color. So you're going to take those and add them to the other figures you have. They begin in your reserve. And then we are going to also need the Pharaoh piece right here. It will always be in play when you're playing with this expansion. And let me set these aside here. We've got this board that will represent these different chambers. And then the deck of cards, the political deck that will go out here. We're going to shuffle that up. We will reveal 3 cards from it into this display. There's also a new type of monument here, the Sphinxes, and they count as every other type of monument for any effects or anything, but for control of monuments, they count as their own 4th different kind of monument, all right? You're also going to select a Pharaoh you'd like to play with, and they recommend you begin with this one here, but you can just shuffle these up and pick the one you want. We'll go ahead and do that. On the back will be some setup. So, for example, this one says that the last player is going to place Amenhotep adjacent to one of their monuments, so that's what they're going to do with this figure here. Then you can flip this over and you are ready to begin. There's these cards which have rules updates that will change some of the actions the players can take. So for example, moving figures. When somebody now takes the move figures action, they can also move their priests from room to room in here, from these chambers to other chambers, as long as they are adjacent. And you'll notice here that these openings let you go from this chamber to this one to this one here, but not there, not from room 2 to room 4 directly, all right? Summoning figures now also let you summon 1 priest into any of these 4 rooms. Control monument, when that event is triggered. At the end of that event, then we're going to resolve the entirety of the palace here. So let's go ahead and put out some figures, and I'll explain how this works and how we go about resolving that. Let's say we have a game here with... how many players should we have? How about 4 players, all right? So I'm going to put this player there, and something like that, all right? Then we resolve them all starting from number 1. Number 1, we are going to see who's got the most priests in there, and they are going to take the ability at the top. So it says, take 1 political card, one of these 3, or remove one of your used or unused political cards from the game, to make each player lose 1 devotion. When you win by having majority and you trigger the ability, you are also going to remove your priests from that space. And we go to room 2, in which this player has the majority, so they remove their pieces, and they may replace one of their monuments with a Sphinx and gain the Sphinx riddle bonus, which is down here. In this case, this one says, review political cards from the top of the deck equal to the number of Sphinxes you control. Pick one of them. Discard the rest. So getting a card from here. Room number 3, this player has majority, so they would lose both of these, though they'd love to be able to leave one. And then they can take 1 political card and gain 2 followers. And these, by the way, as they're being taken, say this first player takes a political card, perhaps they take this one, they add this to their hand of cards. And then in room 2, that player replaced one of their monuments and they got that Sphinx riddle. Then room 3 over here, this player takes a card. Perhaps they take this one and they gain 2 followers. These are not replenished as we do this. Then we go to room 4. And these two would be tied right now. So we are going to resolve the tie based on the devotion of the players. Whoever has the least devotion is going to be the one who wins. So let's say this player has the least devotion. So they will remove their figure and they'll take one political card. And they get to move the Pharaoh on the board up to 3 spaces. Going through anything but ending up somewhere empty on the board. And then once that's done, we can then replenish this with new cards. The reason for this figure being on the board and being moved around is the ability here of this Pharaoh. In this case, the ability is called Beloved. The devotion reward for dominating, winning a battle, and winning each monument majority in Amenhotep's region is increased by 1. So this Pharaoh happens to make things better, make them richer, worth more. There are some that do not behave that way, like Xerxes here is a tyrant king. And during conflict events, when resolving the region where Xerxes is present, players don't gain devotion for any reason, including miracle and worshipful, the cards that you can play. And then the Sphinx riddle, of course, will also be different here. Each of your opponents loses 1 devotion for each Sphinx you control. And that would be, again, these monuments right here. And the setup would be slightly different. In this case, the first player puts out Xerxes instead of the last player for Amenhotep. And there are 5 of these, each one with their own abilities, sometimes utilizing these tokens as well, so that you can keep track of some things in the game. So basically that's how you control this and how you get cards. But what do these cards do, these political cards? Well, you add them to your hand of combat cards, and you are going to, either before or after you take an action, you may play one of these every time you take an action. So let's say I've already collected a few of these. I could then, before I take an action, I could play this, sacrifice up to 3 followers to reclaim all my used battle cards and other political cards, other meaning not this one. So I could pick up my hand, then take my action. Let's say it's a move action. So I move around some things, and I move around my figure to there, let's say. And then I take, if I take another action this round, I could play another one of these, again, either before or after. So I might move and then do this, join the Pantheon. Kill an enemy warrior in your god's region, you may summon a guardian in that space. And these are going to stay out in front of me, just like combat cards would. But when I recall all of my cards, I can pick these back up. So they are not one-time use cards. They continue coming back to you, and every time you take an action, you can play one of these and do whatever it says. Many of them do have a cost associated, so you won't really be able to continue triggering them over and over and over again. Plus, you don't get them back immediately. You have to wait till you pick them up. But they are very powerful, and they do lots of diverse and interesting and strong things. You know, summoning figures, killing your opponent's figures off, being able to immediately get a leg up on something that no one else has access to. So that's how the political cards work. That's how you acquire them, and the different pharaohs and how they're going to affect the game. I'm not going to be going into too many details how all of these work. Just want to give you an idea of how the expansion operates. So let's go ahead and go back up top. Let me tell you what I think of it. That is Pharaoh. So I like Ankh, Gods of Egypt. I think it's a very interesting game. I especially like it with fewer players. For example, I think it's a wonderful 2-player game. However, I think Pharaoh as an expansion, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in just a second, is a better expansion for more players. Having those 2 things, unfortunately, be at odds for me personally. But before I get too far down that rabbit hole, let's break it down starting from the top, all right? With the theme and the setting being first, this is wonderful. Having politics and the Pharaoh be a part of the game now is great. It fits right in thematically, looks good on the table. You have this extra board on the side, which is a sort of zoomed-in view of the political chambers in which you are going to be contending with your opponents. It folds right in. The aesthetics also fold right in. Everything looks beautiful. Same as in the base game. It all looks really good. Cards have that neat illustration style with the iconography at the top and then the description at the bottom. You know, it's all, again, seamless. And that makes sense. It was all made at the same time. The replay value, I think, is good. It increases replayability of the game, but it mostly changes the game, right? It changes the game in strong, palpable ways, I think, this expansion. There will be more asymmetry between the players with this expansion, but this is not the kind of extra that you throw into the game and then forget about it. So the replayability, the replay value is situational, right? You have to want a game with these tremendous and recurring abilities as part of your experience. Otherwise, this is not something that will show up sometimes and not show up other times, so you can just sort of leave it in like extra cards or new monster, right? This is game-changing. So, are you interested in changing the game? That denotes what you think of that replay value for this box specifically, in my opinion. So I think it's okay. The game arc is where I have a problem with this one. As I said just a couple of minutes ago, with fewer players, which is my preferred way to play Ankh, Gods of Egypt, these cards, these political cards, are going to build up very quickly. The players are very quickly going to have hands of cards. I mean, many cards that come from that political deck. And so every turn, just about 20 minutes into the game, every turn is going to be a special turn, if you want it to be. You'll be able to play one of these and then take your action, or take your action and then play one of these. So it very, not very smoothly and very quickly ramps up to become, yes, about the same things you were doing in the original game, all seen through the lens of the Pharaoh expansion. When you play with more players, there is more competition on this secondary board, and so the cards will ideally, and in practice as well, go to different players. So there will be 4 players that have a few of these cards in hand. Every time we deal with, with splitting up those chambers, then they'll go out to the players. So that unfortunately feels a little clunky to me, and feels better with more players, but I don't like the game as much when I'm playing with 4. There are aspects of the game that I don't enjoy as much. So there is that. That's why I think this one does not scale as well down to 2 as I would like it to. The ease of play is fine, but there is a lot more to keep track of. There are now more things to think about in every single turn you take, and this game was, or is, a game that very much benefits from easy turns, deep repercussions of those turns. I think the Pharaoh expansion defrays some of that philosophy. Now it's somewhat complex turns and deep repercussions. So you lose some of that simplicity, some of that streamlined feeling of, on your turn, you pick an action, and then you pick another one, if it's lower than the first on this choosing board. That's it. That's all you do. And then where you end up, what you do, who you recruit, how you recruit, card you play, all has very, you can feel the ripples of those things. Now, you play a single card, blow somebody away. You can play a card, sacrifice some people, and take over a space. That's outside of that turn structure, and it loses elegance because of it, okay? Lastly, tactics, luck, strategy. I think it's very good. I think the expansion does pull a little focus from the original intent of the game, but it also cannot be ignored if you choose to play with it. So it's not like you can add it in and then you as a player choose to basically not even worry about it and keep doing what you were doing. It's too strong. It's too powerful. It's the kind of, it's the kind of soup that you are now adding a handful of a new spice to. And you will not be able to simply not pick up on that taste and not, or ignore it. It is game changing. So again, not the kind of expansion you put in there and forget about. This will color your game experience. If you feel like playing with it, then you can throw it in. But definitely of all the expansions to Ankh, the one that changes the game the most, and you will feel those changes immediately and throughout the entire gaming session. All right. So there you go. Still, having said all of that and talking about how strong it is, how powerful it is, I enjoy that when I'm in the mood for a real change like this brings. So I like it. I like the expansion. I do wish it scaled down a little better. It's my main concern, really, that the game I very much recommend at 2 players. Anybody who asks, I'm like, yeah, Ankh 2 is fantastic. What about Pharaoh? Well, with more players, yes. With 2, it's really strong. You're going to notice you're playing with something new and different. It will make the players more distinct, give you unique abilities, so that's cool. But boy, you cannot even think about ignoring this. You couldn't if you wanted to, you know? So, still, I do like it. This is going to get a 7 out of 10 for me, which is a seal of approval. So, solid expansion. It shakes up the game. Very neat when you want that, right? You don't want the kind of expansion you throw in and then don't feel the changes that it brings. This one you will, and that's exciting. You just have to decide if that's something you're going to be doing often in this game. Is that worth it to you? Or are you very happy with the game you have now? Don't really want an alternate of that game, which is what Pharaoh would end up doing to your sessions of Ankh, Gods of Egypt. So there you go. 7 out of 10. Like I said, my name is Garcia. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.